But so we're going to actually, so looking at this paper here, we're going to actually kind of go backwards for once. I have two corrections that I need to make on myself. The one is an easy correction. I don't even have my Bible out yet. But in chapter, I think it was in 28, it brought up the tithe. Okay. And I said, oh, hey, that's the first time it's written in here. Okay, so that was 28, the very last verse in 28. So 28, 22. Yeah, and it says, you give me and I will give you a tenth. And I just, I said it like, we talked a little bit about tithing, which is super, super important. A lot of discussions about it, if it's old covenant stuff, new covenant stuff. But like I said, me and Pat listened to a whole spiel on it. And God loves a cheerful giver. Something sacrificially. If you got $1 million and you give $100, okay. But now if you got $100 and you give 99 of it, you know what I mean. But my correction is, we talked about it last week, and I said that was just, it's the first time we see this here in Genesis. But then Russell, instead of saying something with everybody here, he waits till afterward, and it's like, hey, that was the second time, right? And then, remember that King Melchizedek that we think was maybe like, hey, Jesus,
of Salem, he was a high priest.
Yeah, and there's no much scripture about this Melchizedek, but if you remember, it was Abraham. Correct? Yeah, gave him a tenth. So I had to rewrite it in my Bible that this is the second time it was talked about and not the first. So if anybody happened to watch last week's video, hopefully they watch this video and realize I'm not too dumb. But then the second thing is, we were talking about Jacob's faith walk. And yes, it is, I believe, some type of faith walk. But there's some question, okay, and I think, and then Russell brought this up too, and I think it's pretty validated, and I think this is what this paper goes along with. But after studying it some more and actually sitting down with Russell here last night a little bit, it seems to think like Jacob is not completely all in for God yet, okay? And so let me back up to chapter 27, verse 20. 27, verse 20. It says, Isaac asked his son, how did you find it so quickly, my son? And remember, this is when Jacob was tricking Isaac. He was pretending to be Esau, and he was trying to deceive his dad into giving him his blessing. And he says there, the Lord your God, okay, gave me success, he replied. So he was lying about, getting the food real quick. So there he doesn't say the Lord my God, or he doesn't just say God. He says the Lord your God, Isaac's, okay? And then go to chapter 28, verses 13. It says there above it stood the Lord, and this is when he was having that dream. He says, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. So even God is not saying, I'm your God yet. So maybe Jacob's not all in yet, okay? And then still in 28, verse 21, it says, so that I return safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God. So this was at Bethel, right? When he made that rock statue thing, and he's actually going to come back to Bethel here in a few chapters. But he made this idol thing, and he says, basically, so when I return here, then the Lord will be my God. Okay, and we won't see that till chapter 35. Okay, so, and then we're going to get into one other verse today when we get into it. But so kind of keep that in the back of your mind. That was something that Russell pointed out, and I'm like, kind of got something to it. So he definitely had to have at least some faith, but maybe he's not just completely all in. You know what I mean?
So it's like, I don't know, I was talking to somebody last night, and it's like, you know, your parents teaching you about Jesus, and you know Jesus,
Yep.
but you're like, I'm not 100% sure that I'm going to believe this yet.
So my first 39 years of my life, basically, before he was completely my Lord and Savior. You know what I mean? Which is, yeah, and I think that was most of our experiences in this room. You know what I mean? Grew up knowing Jesus.
Heard about Jesus all
Yeah.
my life.
Yeah. Even would talk to him in the combine every now and then, but nothing like I do nowadays. You know what I mean? So, all right, good stuff, Russell. So today, Russell, the thing is, if you got something, just yell it out.
Bring the board. Bring the board.
Oh.
That sounds like he's just kind of making a deal with guys. He's gonna make a balance
That's what I think.
Yeah.
I'll do it if.
Yeah.
And you do all this stuff for me, Lord.
And I wouldn't use that as your plan, you know, and I wouldn't tell an unbeliever, be like, hey, you know, test God on that. I don't think I would. And actually, hey, so there's the thing, going to the tithing. It just popped in when I said test. That is the only place in Scripture where God says you can test him on his tithing, because you tithe and he will reward you. But now you can't go into it with that attitude. Do you know what I'm saying? But I believe that's in Malachi 3:10, I believe, where it says, test me on this, or something like that. Okay, so we'll get into chapter 30 and 31 today, if everything goes good, which it should. Verses 1 through 13 here. We're gonna be learning about more kids. We learned about Leah's kids, which is the wife that he was tricked into getting. And now we're going to learn about 4 more sons here in verses 1 through 13 by 2 maidservants. Okay. And this goes back to his grandpa, right? Abraham, grandpa. Okay. So this is a generational thing here again that we talked about last week. So, I mean, I don't know everybody's circumstances in this room, but, you can end generational curses. I mean, it is possible, but right here, Jacob is falling into the same trap that his grandpa did. And another good point of this, in today's world, okay, stop making baby daddies. You know, as men, that's not what we're called to do. So as a spiritual leader of our house, there are times when we need to, and don't take it the wrong way, that we need to tell our wife, no, like, hey, we're not going to do something, okay? They won't like to hear it probably at the time, but if it's not in God's way or God's will, you got to say no. You know what I'm saying? So Jacob has opportunities here to be like, hey, let's pump the brakes on all this, like, kid stuff with my maidservants and all that. Like, let's do it the right way. But he didn't. So he just went along with it. And just like sometimes to make our life easier, we would just agree with our wife, get along, just go along to get along. Is that how that saying goes? Just go along to get along. So, but there's times you're gonna have to say no, huh? Right? But I mean, it's true.
Make it any way you want to.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, it is something, you know what I mean? If you're crossing God's ways, I mean, as the leader, I mean, we're supposed to, you know. Yeah. So, all right. So verse 1, chapter 30, it says, when Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister. So she said to Jacob, give me children or I'll die. Having 2 wives is not going to be a great situation in this family. There's jealousy, hatred, running around here. And it says, so she says, give me children or I'll die. So back in those days, a childless woman to a lot of people was really no better than a dead wife. Okay. Because I mean, they were wanting, you know, a step better would be a wife that would at least have you a daughter, but even that, I mean, they wanted a wife to have them a son. Yeah, that's right. So in this was an embarrassment to her and to her husband, and that's kind of what she's getting at there, talking about dying and looking ahead. And this is what's crazy. Looking ahead, Rachel will die giving birth. Okay, so she's gonna get her wish, but she's gonna die giving birth, and that's to Benjamin. But we won't get into that today. But that's a pretty good reference there to it. So verse 2 says, Jacob became angry with her and said, am I in the place of God, who has kept you from having children? So basically what he's saying, who do you think I am, God? He's like, I can't control this. What do you want me to do about it? Jacob knows that God is the only one that can open and shut the wombs. And he, no matter what he does, he can sleep with her as many times, but he can't make it happen. All right, verse 3. Then she said, here is Bilhah, my maidservant. Remember when they got married, that's what Laban gave her. Sleep with her so that she can bear children for me, and that through her I can build a family. So if you remember, that was kind of a common practice at this time. That's why the Hagar, having Ishmael, Hagar and Abraham thing, that wasn't totally uncommon, but it's not God's way, obviously. And it even goes so far. And did we learn this when we did Abraham and Hagar? That like when the maidservant would have the child, they would actually sit on the knees of their owner. So I didn't think so either, but it was brought up this time. So they would actually, picture, like, so say Rachel will lay down, this Bilhah would be sitting on her knees, giving birth to this child. So it's supposed to be symbolic, like it's going. Well, but I'm saying it's shooting it out the right way. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, but it was supposed to be like pretending that it was Rachel actually symbolic of Rachel actually giving the birth. I didn't think we talked about that, but then it was brought up here, and I'm like, I didn't remember. But so that's even how far these people would go. Like if their wife cannot have a kid, then they they go to the maidservant and then actually try to pretend it's all coming out that way. It's kind of weird. Let's see. And right here. So this would have been a great time for Jacob to step up and be like, no. Okay. Tell his wife, no, we're not going to do that. My grandpa did that. Did not work out so well. Ishmael and their kids wound up being problems. Like, let's not do it. And this was a good point that was brought up. So God's work, God's stuff that he's going to do, okay, it's always going to demand patience. It's not on our timeline, it's his timeline. And things don't always happen as fast as we want them to.
But as we know now, you gotta have all these kids, 12 tribes, all the way down to the end of time.
That's right.
God's way.
Yep, that's exactly right.
It says here in my notes that was a expression symbolic of adoption. So I guess when they would do that.
So your Bible talks about it, sitting on the knees? Yeah.
So it says that's how they adopted the child.
Nice. So the way I take it too, like it is like, I guess legally, so to say, like it is legally Rebecca's child. So, I mean, culturally, legally, I mean, I don't know how they did it, but like it wasn't.
Since it was her slave.
Right, yeah. Okay, so verse 4, so she gave him to her servant Bilhah as a wife. Okay, so that's another thing. Like they're trying to do it the right way by calling her wife, but it's still not the way it's supposed to be done. So Jacob slept with her, and she became pregnant and bore him a son. Then Rachel said, God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and given me a son. Because of this, she named him Dan. And Dan means vindicated. So verse 7. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, I have had a great struggle with my sister, and I have won. So she named him Naphtali, which means struggle. And some translations for struggled actually call it wrestling too, which I think is kind of cool because later we're going to learn about Jacob wrestling with God. Not today, but another day. Verse 9. It says, when Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her maidservant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, what good fortune? So she named him Gad, which means good fortune or a troop. All right, verse 12. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, how happy am I? The women will call me happy. So she named him Asher, which obviously means happy. All right, so verse 14. Well, let's pause there. So, I mean, it's like baby wars right here. It's like, hey, you know what I mean? This is literally kind of like a Jerry Springer thing. Yeah, that's right. Like, let's see who can get, more kids. Yeah, that's right. I mean,
I just imagine one of them bringing in another maidservant, Jacob, like,
I know. It's like, he's like, all right, who am I sleeping with tonight? You know what I mean? But instead of manning up and being like, look, let's nip this stuff in the butt here. You know what I mean?
it says his fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth sons were born through maidservant and concubines.
Yeah. And that one paper, that's why I printed those papers out. So like you can always go back and be like, hey, because I think Genesis and a lot of the Old Testament still talks about these 12 sons because they come to be very important. And then if you ever wanted to think, okay, whose mom is this one? You know what I mean? At least it's all printed out for you and you can go back and look at it. All right, so here we go. During wheat harvest, Reuben, now if you remember Reuben, he's the first son, okay, from Leah. That was the firstborn son. Went out into the fields and found some mandrake plants, which he brought to his mother Leah. Rachel then said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. Now, before looking it up, did anybody know what a mandrake was? I didn't think so, because I didn't either. Okay, so a mandrake, and roughly Reuben's about 5 years old at this time. Okay, and he's basically out playing. He's not going to look for these mandrakes. Be like, me and Bear was out in the fields, playing when we were little. And he stumbles across these mandrakes. So these mandrakes are basically like a aphrodisiac. Okay, people would use them for fertility. Yeah, that's right. So they were, so Reuben brings back these mandrakes, and Rachel, she still has not had a child, so she's like, I need those. Okay, she's wanting to put her faith in that mandrake instead of in God. So she's going to try to cut a bargain here for these mandrakes.
By this time, Isaac probably needed those mandrakes.
You mean Jacob?
Jacob.
Yeah. See, so many names. He probably just needs a nap, you know what I'm saying? All right, so 15. But she said to her, wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you take my son's mandrakes too? So, realistically, Leah was the wife, and then Jacob wakes up the next morning and is like, I don't like this wife. I wanted your other sister, daughter. No, well, daughter of Laban. And so,
And my cousin.
yeah. And so, like, Leah is, you already took my husband's love, because Leah knows she's not loved, especially as much as Rachel. And now she is wanting these mandrakes. Basically, Leah knows why, because she's hoping that it's going to give her, the ability to have kids. And then so it goes on in 15. Very well, Rachel said, he can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrake. So she's like, hey, bargain, you go have Jacob, I'll take these mandrakes. Because, that's how bad she's wanting a kid. She just assumed they share this husband, like, hey, you go sleep with him tonight. All right, so, and amongst that, so it seems like when you kind of read that 15, that Jacob has been spending, obviously, probably more time in Rachel's bed than in Leah's, because, Rachel's the one that he wants to be with anyways, than in Leah's, so that's why it worked good for a bargaining trip, or bargaining Chip. Thank you. I knew something with a at the end of it. All right. But one thing that's Rachel is forgetting to understand that no matter these mandrakes and all that, okay, it's God opening and shutting these wombs, and she's not believing it. She's letting that go by the wayside. It's God that'll give the babies, not the mandrakes. All right, so 16. So when Jacob came in from the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him. "You must sleep with me tonight," she said. "I have hired you." Now that's a weird way. "I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he slept with her that night. You know, this dude's just coming in from the field, probably exhausted. He's like, "All right, which one tonight?" You know what I mean? And then hired you. Like, that is a weird way. That's right. That is a weird way to be talking to your husband. Yeah. And nowhere is there ever any mention of Jacob ever like, hey, wait a minute. This family is getting way out of control. We all need to sit down and have a talk here. Nowhere. No. Nowhere is this ever brought up.
But, you know, Jacob also might see, you know, all these kids that he's having, and, you know, God did promise him, you know, he's going to have great numbers. And
so maybe he thinks this is all part of the plan.
Right.
Yeah. Which, I mean, God uses all these kids for sure. So, and I mean, that's very possible. But man, you would think after a while, it'd be like, hey, let's try to start doing this the right way.
Can I just have a week to myself?
Right. All right. So verse 17, it says, God listened to Leah. Okay. And she became pregnant and bore Jacob a fifth son. So it seems like God really... Yes.
So I'm trying to figure out what I'm missing.
Yes.
Because if that's the fifth son, but fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth were born with concubines, how's that working out?
Who's the fifth son?
It's Leah's.
Leah's fifth son.
Thank you.
Leah's, and then the
Yeah.
other ones are from the surrogate women. Or
Yeah.
Say it.
You got it, Bear?
Yep.
Okay.
Reuben, Simeon, whatever, Levi, and Judah was the first four, and then
Yep.
I think there would have been her fifth one.
Yep.
Every say them names.
Yep. All right. So God listened to Leah, and she became pregnant and bore Jacob a fifth son. So it seems like God really kind of has a heart, you know, for Leah here.
Well, it starts right there in the beginning, or the end of like 29:31, when the Lord saw Leah was not loved.
That's right.
And then that's where it all started.
That's
there.
right. Because so now it's the second time that God has basically intertwined here for Leah, okay, because she's not getting love from Jacob, and so God opened her back up, okay, opened the womb back up, and then here we go in 18. Then Leah said, God has rewarded me for giving my maidservant to my husband, so she named him Issachar. So she's thinking it's because she was, I guess, obedient enough to give her maidservant, but no, in reality, I think it's because God, you know, kind of feeling bad for her, and he's working this plan out, you know, to get all these children. Verse 19, it says, Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son from Leah Bear. Then Leah said, God has presented me with a precious gift. This time my husband will treat me with honor, because I have borne him 6 sons. So she named him Zebulun, which Zebulun means honor. Issachar meant reward. But then I like 21. Sometime later, she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. So if you look on that paper too, it actually has Dinah in there, but she's written in red. Most times you never hear, like when you go through genealogies, you don't hear much about when women were born. So this one kind of sticks out, and she'll come back into play, okay, again, and when we get into chapter 34. So in a couple weeks, she'll come back into play. That's why I think it's why it was written at least when her birth was, because she's going to have a part in all this. Verse 22, it says, Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her. So he's listening to everything here. God sees what's going on. And opened her womb. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son and said, God has taken away my disgrace. She named him Joseph, and said, "May the Lord add to me another son." Okay, so she's happy, but she's already wanting more. She had one kid, now it's like, hey, hope God gives me one more. And I think then the next one's going to be Benjamin, right? And then that's when she's going to die in that one. So maybe, I guess, careful what you're wishing for. All right, so that ends that section. Popping out a lot of babies. It's baby war time. And then now we're going to get into, I like this, deceiving the deceiver of the deceiver. Okay? I mean, this runs rampant in this family. So verse 25, and I actually like this story, being a sheep farmer. It's kind of cool. After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way so I can go back to my own homeland. Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you." Verse 27, but Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." He added, "Name your wages and I will pay them."
So this is what you asked me last night.
Okay.
About Laban saying, "The Lord has blessed me because of you."
Mm-hmm.
Well, so, and it just hit me on my way here. Maybe Laban thinks that since Isaac is such a holy man, that the Lord sent Jacob to Laban, even though Laban doesn't believe in the Lord either.
Right.
And Jacob's not believing, but he thinks,
it's all running through Isaac.
right.
Okay.
Or, I don't know, some sort of way that Jacob came to Laban through the Lord because, he doesn't know that Jacob doesn't believe in the Lord.
Right. Or at least not wholeheartedly yet.
At least wholeheartedly.
Yeah. But he definitely, so Laban is smart enough that he realizes, though, that he's getting blessed because of the Lord.
Some divine intervention sent you to me.
So this divine nation, or whatever, however you want to say it. So if you go look at that, it's like fortune tellers. Okay, this is some off thing of God. Tarot cards, fortune tellers, and then we're gonna learn later about these gods that were in Laban's house. So like Russell said, this dude is not a believer at all in God. He just knows that whoever this God is blessing him because either Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob, or somebody has been there, and that's how Laban's been getting rich. So this anything like that is all what I really want to get across. Any like your fortune tellers, your Ouija boards, any of that like crazy demonic stuff, just don't do it. Yeah, don't do it. Don't get involved in it, because I mean that stuff opens up. We talked about it before, but the spiritual stuff that we can't see opens your mind right up into it, and it causes trouble. Okay, so he said the same thing before. Name your wages and I will pay them. Okay, I don't think this time he's necessarily looking for that bargain like he was before. I think he's basically, I think he's trying to already plan a deception on Jacob. He's trying to get him to stay for Laban's own profitability, because he knows, like, if Jacob leaves, hey,
God's not with him.
Yeah, God ain't gonna be here anymore, and then I'm gonna start losing money. So this name your wages, I don't think he's looking for that bargain. I think he's really trying to get him to stay here, whatever it would take, so then he can keep making money, because he's probably already got this whole sheep thing planned out. All right, so 29, Jacob said to him, "You know how I have worked for you, and how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when may I do something for my own household?" So Jacob has the leverage. he's basically explaining to Laban, the only reason you're getting profitable is because I've been here, because I brought God here. And Jacob's wanting to leave, and it's time. He's tired of taking care of somebody else, and he's gonna go. He wants to go to start taking care of his own family. Go back to where he is from, where he's supposed to be. Verse 31 says, "What shall I give you?" he asked. "Don't give me anything," Jacob replied. "But," see, here we go. When there's buts in the Bible, it always means something. "But if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them." Verse 32 says, "Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages, and my honesty will testify for me in the future. Whenever you check on the wages you have paid me, any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark-colored, will be considered stolen." So he's going to take all... Jacob is wanting to take all, basically, the colored, spotted animals, okay? The sheep and goats. Now, everybody was pretty much in agreement on, like, the herd was probably mostly all white, so this wasn't very many, okay? So that's why Laban is going to be thinking, sign me up for this deal. That's a good deal. And so the white sheep were probably in the minority and not that much, and maybe at that time maybe there was a difference in price too. Like maybe they were considered, maybe they didn't grow as good or something, smaller in nature.
Well, you think like the white sheep, when they produce wool, didn't have any imperfections.
There you go. So worth more probably. So the white sheep, huh? Yeah. Well, no, not nowadays, because everybody nowadays wants all these colored ones for their kids. Oh yeah, like I always wanted a pure white herd just because I'd look cool when they're out there grazing on the hill. But now so many people want to buy colored ones that people that come get 4 or 5 here and there. They're like, "You got any colored ones?"
I mean, for the price of wool, is it?
Oh no, well see, ours ain't the wool sheep, so we don't sell any of the wool. Yeah.
Actually, it costs more to get somebody to come in than the wool's worth.
Yeah.
But if you sheared them yourself.
It's still
Worth.
it wouldn't if you shear the wool right now, it ain't even worth stuffing in a sack to go take anywhere.
Shear when the kids had, you get a lot of blood right here.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So these white ones are probably worth. But so this sounds like a good deal to Laban. He's probably thinking, okay, because right away in verse 34 he says agreed. Okay, he didn't have to think about it. Like, hey, sign me up. All right, so agreed, said Laban. Let it be as you have said. But so he's a jerk. That same day he removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flock. So that very day when this went on, Laban basically had his kids go out there, hurry up and gather all the speckled stuff, take them 3 days away. That way Jacob can't even find them. Okay, and I'm assuming there's probably a lot of sheep out there. I mean, I don't know how many, and none of the commentaries ever said how much they thought, but I'm assuming there's quite a bit. Because, I mean, we get some colored ones. They would stick out. But maybe, so there literally probably was just a few that they just probably were amongst the sheep and nobody really even noticed them. And that's why Laban had his sons go out there and take them. And take them far enough away where Jacob ain't gonna find them. All right, so verse 37. Jacob, however, being clever, so we're deceiving the deceiver, Jacob, however, took fresh cut branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees, and made white stripes on them by peeling the bark and exposing the white inner wood of the branches. Okay? Then he placed the peeled branches in all the watering troughs so that they would be directly in front of the flock when they came to drink. When the flocks were in heat and came to drink, they mated in front of the branches, and they bore young that were streaked or speckled or spotted. Now, I had never heard of this till just a year or so ago. I had somebody that come to look at the sheep and was asking about the colored ones. And he's like, do you know in the Old Testament there's stuff about you put certain pieces of wood in front of the sheep that they're supposed to make them have these colored babies? Have you ever done that or looked into it? And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Really?
Yeah. But this guy did, and I didn't know it. And so I remember looking it up then, and like I said, that was a year or two ago, and I totally forgot about it. And then, it comes up again. So some research says that the nutrients in these types of wood, the poplar, almond, and I don't know what a plane tree is.
Oh, the chestnut in here.
Okay, all right. So that there's some kind of nutrients that could lead to wool coloration. Okay, there has been some research done on that. Other people just say, and I think this goes a little bit better because what we'll read in 31, that this was just for showing it's God doing it. You know what I mean? Which it's going to be God if he can make babies in humans, it's him making the babies in the sheep. So God's the one taking care of Jacob, and I don't think the pieces of wood really had hardly anything to do with it. But some researchers do actually think the wood actually helped or had a part in it or something. So I mean, if you want, I'll sell you white sheep, and you can take 2 of them home and see if it'll work. But I'm not going to cut out one. I don't even know what a poplar, almond, or a chestnut tree looks like. So
Poplar's pretty simple.
well, you're talking to a guy that's ignorant on
Makes grass grow.
on the tree. Yeah, I can make grass grow, and that's about it. All right, so I did want to say that I mean, if you want to look into it, like, hey, there might be really something to it, or it was just God. Verse 40 says, Jacob set apart the young of the flock by themselves, but made the rest face the streaked and dark-colored animals that belonged to Laban. Thus he made separate flocks for himself, and did not put them with Laban's animals. Verse 41 and 42. Whenever the stronger females were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in the troughs in front of the animals, so they would mate near the branches. But if the animals were weak, he would not place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban, and the strong ones to Jacob. Literally what he is doing is selective breeding. Okay, he is taking the good stuff. Let's throw this wood in front of them, make them have the colored babies, so I take the colored babies. But if there's an old dilapidated thing, something maybe somebody that don't feed their animals very well will be coming in there, and they start breeding, he's going to take that wood away, so they have a white baby, and then it goes to Laban. Okay? So, first chance of selective breeding we hear is in Genesis 30, which is pretty good. And we do the same stuff to this day. I mean, from a corn crop to, that's how we've got our hybrids and stuff that we've got now. I do it on our sheep. The kids, their first few fair sheep, they were tiny, and now after breeding certain ones, we've raised them up a little. Yeah. You like that, mama? Keep that, mama, and keep this ram, put them together, and that's what you got. All right, so verse 43. In this way, the man, meaning Jacob, grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks and maidservants and men servants and camels and donkeys. So he's rich. Okay, he's got a lot going on. And that number of large flocks, I didn't find anything that says like how many. Like people think a lot. I'd say there's a lot. Picture out west when they're grazing thousands of animals on thousands of acres. That's kind of what I picture in my head. All right, so verse 31. Laban's not. There's always turmoil. He's not going to be happy. And Jacob's finally gonna flee away and go back to his home where he wanted to in chapter 30. So verse 1 says, Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all his wealth from what belonged to our father. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude towards him was not what it had been. All right, so notice there in verse 1 that these sons were talking, and Jacob overheard them, and overheard him say, Jacob has taken. It's not that Jacob has earned it. He's these sons are basically saying Jacob has stole all this. And the sons hadn't realized that Jacob was the reason for Laban's wealth to begin with, okay, through God's blessings. You know, that was Laban, I call him different things each time, but he wouldn't have got as rich as he was if Jacob wasn't there. All right, so verse 3. Then the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. Okay, so now God is saying it is time. So if you remember, that was 30:25. It said, after Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, send me on my way so I can go back to my homeland. And then they come up with that deal to stay, because that wasn't God's time yet. Now it's God's time. God says, go to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you.
Because Jacob didn't have his
Faith.
Well, he didn't have his great herd.
Yeah, oh yeah. God was building him up for exactly what he wanted him to have. Good point. Good job. Okay, so verse 4. So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where his flocks were. So this is that's one of them verses that you can just read through and be like, okay, so he's calling for his wife. If you pay a little more close attention to it, he's calling them out in the open field. Okay, good place for privacy. Nobody's going to overhear what they're saying, because he's trying to keep this a secret. And that's something I definitely wouldn't have picked up on myself if I wouldn't have read it from somebody else. But I'm just saying. All right, so verse 5. He said to them, I see that your father's attitude towards me is not what it was before, but the God, here it is again, but the God of my father, okay, he doesn't say my God yet, here it is again, but the God of my father has been with me. So he knows this God of his father has been with him, but he's still just not the wholehearted, like Russell has been saying. All right, verses 6 through 9. You know that I have worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. If he said, the speckled ones will be your wages, then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said, the streaked ones will be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me. And I guess we didn't, we weren't given all them details about, changing his wages 10 times, but it comes up again. So it must have happened, maybe Laban come back and was like, hey, now you only get the black spotted ones or something, or then the streaked ones. And then but it has worked. And every time Laban has ever changed the rules, God has always made it work out in Jacob's favor.
Well, I picture it as, Laban seeing Jacob get all these great spotted, sheep and stuff.
Yeah.
So he's like, no, you can have the white ones.
Yeah, and then keeps going back.
Yeah, this back and forth like that. That's how I picture it.
Yeah, that's probably pretty accurate. Trying the deceiver to deceive the deceiver of the deceiver. Oh man. And Laban, so he's basically trying to outmaneuver Jacob, and God's not allowing it. Everything that Laban tries to do, God has always worked it in the Jacob's favor. All right, verse 10. In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw that the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, or spotted. The angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob, I answered, here I am. And he said, look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, or spotted. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel. And remember, the Bethel is that town where he made that rock statue thing. And then it goes on, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. And this 10 through 12 right here, this dream, I think is confirmation that this whole colored sheep thing with the wood and all that it was all supernatural from God, because God is saying like, hey, I made all this happen. So I think the wood was probably just for show, I guess. That's kind of what I'm taking out of this. It didn't matter what the wood, if it was there or not, God was gonna make it happen.
So I'm going to interject.
Yeah.
This one too. So I see it as, you know, this is kind of before Jacob was about to go, you know, when he told Laban, you know, he was ready to leave. So I feel like he had this dream before then, and it's God saying, hey, if you choose the speckled sheep, then this is how you're going to have your wealth, you know.
So it happened even before the first time he told Laban that he wanted to leave.
And that's why Jacob decided, hey, I want the speckled sheep.
Speckled
I don't
sheep.
want the white one.
Yeah.
I want the speckled.
Yeah, that's good. Good job, Russell. See, you're always too scared to talk. Now look at all the good points you bring. All right. The only other thing I want to point out in 13, you remember how I said, I don't know if it was last week before, but like if there's ever an angel or God appearing to somebody in Scripture, like they always identify themselves. And right there in 13 it says, I am the God of Bethel. So God is identifying himself to them, or to Jacob. All right, so 14 through 16. Then Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, which is true, because remember they were sold for 7 years of work, but he has used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you. Okay, that's the girls telling Jacob. Do whatever God has told you. So Rachel and Leah, they pretty much have lost respect for their dad, and they realize that the wealth that God has brought upon Laban because of Jacob, Isaac, whatever you want to say, he has squandered it. I mean, it said in there, he has used up what was paid for us. So them 7 years worth of work, 14 years worth of work that Jacob did, made Laban even richer. It's all gone. And it's basically all now back in Jacob's hands, because with the whole trickery with the sheep stuff. So that leads me to a proverb of all things, Proverbs 13:22. And this is just kind of a side note because it's talking about an inheritance. Like these girls are complaining, like saying like basically there's no inheritance left for us. So like whatever God tells you to do, let's do it. So this is just something odd. This wasn't even in any of my commentaries or anything. Something I pulled out of my own right cheek here. Well, only because so my wife for a long time listened to this guy called Joe McGee. He's got, I forget what his ministry is called, but he's a pretty good guy. Seems pretty legit, sound in the scripture and stuff. And he always talks about, I'm gonna say he's kind of like maybe a mini version of that finance guy, Dave Ramsey. So this Joe McGee always talks about, you know, God is a God of order, which we've talked about, and you got to get your finances in order if you want the rest of your life in order. And he brought up a couple of times in some of his lessons that, you know, as men, like we're supposed to leave an inheritance to our children. And then here, that's what he's talking about here in Proverbs 22. It says, a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children, but a sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous. And that last part, Dennis, kind of goes along with what happened here. So a sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous. So this Laban was storing up this wealth and wound up going all back to Jacob, supposed to be the more righteous guy. And I didn't even know that part of the verse. I just knew the top part, and I'll be darned if it fit both criterias right here. And I'm like, I can't believe it. None of them commentaries had that in there. Right. I know. Okay, so then that I have another little thing. 1 Peter 1:4. I can cheat a little bit because I got some of them sticky marked. Well, in these thin line Bibles, some of these last chapters or books in the New Testament, they're legit like just one page. They're kind of tough to find. So 1 Peter 1:4 says, well, I'm gonna start in 3, so it kind of gives a little bit of the what's going on. So verse 3 says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ." So we have hope in the resurrection of Jesus from the dead, and into, here's verse 4, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade, kept in heaven for you. Okay, so that leads me to then the last point. Yes, as you know, as men, we should be leaving an inheritance to our children. But the greatest inheritance you can leave your children and anybody is faith in Jesus. And I think that's what that verse is kind of alluding to, because it's something that'll never spoil, it'll never perish, or it'll never fade. So I thought that all went really good together. And I think that maybe Rachel and Leah, so think about this. I know we haven't got into the gods of Laban here yet, but I think Rachel and Leah are seeing what God is doing for Jacob, and I think they're starting to realize this, hey, this inheritance of God, that God is the inheritance that they're supposed to be getting. I think they're actually starting to realize that they're going from, hey, Laban, our dad was worshiping this stuff, and then, hey, this God of Jacob here, this guy's the real deal. So I think they're starting to see that, because they're at the end when it says, so do whatever God has told you. All right, so verse 17, it says, "Then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods he had accumulated in Paddan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan." So he's got a lot of stuff. Pack it all up and start moving. Okay, it's probably be like moving a city, I would imagine.
500 miles.
Yeah, 500 miles back from what Skinner said last week to Dallas, from here to Dallas. All right, at least he made the trip once, so maybe he kind of remember a few landmarks here and there, but that's been several years ago too.
Yeah, 20.
So verse 19, it says, "When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods." Okay, and you're like, what's going on here? Okay, I know we've alluded to it, so it's probably already starting to make a little more sense. But this word here for gods is teraphim. Okay, it basically means idols. And instead of me writing it all down, they were actually kind of like maybe little figurines and stuff too. So I'm just going to read it from MacArthur here. 3019. We in 3019? 3119. 3119. So this is his commentary for that verse. These images are figurines of varying sizes, usually of nude goddesses with accentuated sexual features. See, this guy uses some big words a lot of times. That's why I don't. That's why I have several. Either signaled, so these figurines, sexual features, either signaled special protection for, or inheritance rights for, or guaranteed fertility for the bearer, or perhaps possession by Rachel would call for Jacob to be recognized as the head of the household at Laban's death. Okay, so don't really know exactly why she took these. Could be for the fertility, the protection. I look at it and it kind of made me, if these little figurines were usually of some goddesses, and so I'm assuming maybe like whatever they had at the time, they weren't Greek goddesses, but whatever these people would have been worshiping. I'm almost actually wondering So you know how some of these people, like, they have Saint this for this, like Saint whatever for to help find my lost purse or something, Saint this to try to make it rain. So, you know, I'm wondering if that's a little, hopefully not, a little dabble in some of that stuff. I mean, shouldn't be praying to no saint or anything else as these idols, these teraphims for anything else, you know, pray to God for it. So, but that's what I pictured, these little mini little statue things that Laban had that, you know, say he needed rain, he would get one of them idols out and start worshiping. And, you know, if there was one for childbearing, maybe instead of the mandrakes, maybe Rachel stole that one for that reason. So,
Yeah, she says she believed that they brought good luck.
mm-hmm. Good. Yep. All right. So, verse 20. So, know that Rachel stole him, and Laban doesn't know it. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban, the Aramean, by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had, and crossing the river, he headed for the hill country of Gilead. Okay, so it says there Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean, and why now all of a sudden is he called Laban the Aramean? Well, somehow this word deceived, and then you put the Aramean with it, it's basically meaning Jacob is stealing the heart, okay, by not saying like, hey, we're getting ready to leave, you know, I'm taking your kids, your grandkids. It's not necessarily like deceiving, like we've been learning about deceiving. It's more like, hey, destroying his heart. You know what I'm saying? So the deceive part is to steal, and then to steal the heart, and then of the deceiver comes, that's where the word Aramean comes from. So, or Syrian. Some books have Syrian. Yeah. All right, so, and then 21 there, so he fled with all he had. So like I said, that's a lot, and he's got to cross a river and into the hill country. So yeah, and that Euphrates River through Scripture is always very important. It comes back in actually Revelation. Lots of good stuff happen. Well, bad stuff happens along the Euphrates. But this is not going to be an easy trip, okay? So verse 22 and 23, it says, on the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. Taking his relatives with him, he pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. Then God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. So due to the big family and all the possessions that Jacob has, and it's taken him a while, so it only took 3 days for Laban, or 7 days, for Laban to catch up to him. And there in 24, God was there to protect Jacob. So God's basically coming up to Laban, basically telling Laban, hey, don't mess with Jacob. Okay. God made sure there will be a discussion between Jacob and Laban, but not a war. Okay. All right, verse 25. Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead when Laban overtook him, and Laban and his relatives camped there too. Then Laban said to Jacob, what have you done? You deceived me, and you've carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me so I could send you away with joy and singing to the music of tambourines and harps? You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing. I have the power to harm you, but last night, and here it is again, the God of your father said to me, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's house, but why did you steal my gods? All right, so Laban through 26 through 29 there, Laban's playing the victim, okay, pretending to love his kids, his grandkids, you know, even though he's left them nothing. Heck, he sold his kids. And he even is saying, like, Jacob, if you would have just told me you were going to be leaving, I would have threw you a party. Well, how did he put it? I'll send you away with joy and singing. I mean, this dude ain't. I mean, he's mad. The first thing Jacob should be thinking, dude, you're tracking me down. Like I'm not believing anything you're saying here. And Laban is realizing, okay, I know you want to get back to your father's house, but then the last thing he says there in verse 30, but why did you steal my gods? Okay, he's worried about these idols. Verse 31, Jacob answered Laban, I was afraid because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. So this is going to why were you even leaving? But if you find anyone who has your gods, he shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, see for yourself whether there is anything of yours here with me, and if so, take it. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. Okay, so this is done in front of family. One, that way the family can be there. If Laban says, like if I go say that stand is mine of Russell's and I take it, and Russell says that's his, well, you got to have somebody there to be like, no, okay, that really was Laban's, or no, that's really Jacob. So it's done in front of people. So if Jacob knew that Rachel had probably stolen these gods, I don't think he probably would have said, who, if you find them, these people, they would die. But deceiving runs very good in this house. So, verse 33. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the two maidservants, but he found nothing. Okay. After he came out of Leah's tent, he entered Rachel's tent, and remember, Rachel's got him. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them inside her camel's saddle and was sitting on them. Laban searched through everything in the tent but found nothing. And Rachel, being a good learning to deceive, Rachel said to her father, don't be angry, my lord, and my lord a lot of times means father, that I cannot stand up in your presence. I am having my period. So he searched, but he could not find the household god. So, trickery, deceiving, it comes supernatural in this family.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of be.
Yeah. And so the big deal with this whole period thing, so women at that time, when they were on their period, on their cycle, whatever you want to call it, like they were deemed unclean, even up into the New Testament days. So there is no man alive at that time would have been like, hey, I don't care, get out, move, I want to check that saddle. There was nobody going to do that. And Rachel, knowing this, that's why she did it, because she knew nobody was gonna have her move. All right, so 36. So Laban didn't find anything. Okay, so now Jacob's mad. 36 says, Jacob was angry and took Laban to task. What is my crime? He asked Laban. What sin have I committed that you hunt me down? Now that you have searched through all my goods, what have you found that belongs to your household? Put it here in front of your relatives and mine, and let the judging between the two of us. So he's basically saying, hey, you found something, put it out here. Like, where is it? Come on, you said I had stuff, but he didn't have anything. So he's getting a little feisty. Jacob is. All right, so 38 through 42. I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep and goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten rams from your flocks. I did not bring your animals torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself. And you demanded payment from me for whatever was stolen by day or night. This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime, and the cold at night, and sleep fled from my eyes. It was like this for the 20 years I was in your household. I worked for you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times. 42. If the God of my father, see there it is again, the God of Abraham, and here's a new word, and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardships and the toil in my hands, and last night he rebuked you. So Jacob knew that he went and God had talked to Laban before. All right. So this 38 through 42 there, it's like it's a speech, okay? Jacob's probably been letting this bubble up for a long time, and he's finally letting it all out. He's been waiting to say this for a while, and he lays it all on the table right here. He's like, hey, I've done all this stuff. I had to take the loss for some of this stuff. You don't have nothing to complain about. And so I don't know if anybody in here, so I mean, basically Laban has been the boss, like a working environment, the boss of Jacob. So if there's anybody that's bosses in here, okay, here's my little side note. Make sure you let the ones, or at least like the good ones that work for you, know that they're appreciated, because this Jacob never felt appreciation at all from Laban. All right. And there's one thing that Jacob left out. Okay, he had to pay for work for his wives and all this. But he didn't say, he didn't leave out that, or he left out that he was tricked with Leah the first time. Okay, he just says he had to work for his daughters or something like that. But he did not point Leah out like, hey, I wanted only your one daughter and then you fooled me with it. He left that part out of this. And I think because they're around all their relatives, and I think he was actually having a heart moment and didn't want to hurt Leah's feelings right then and there. All right, so 42, the fear of Isaac. Okay, that was a new this is another divine name, and some people relate it really close to Yahweh. But basically, so you know, when you see the fear of Isaac, that is a divine name for God, just like the God of Abraham and whatnot. It'll actually come up again at the end. So we can read the rest of it. I only got one other little thing that goes along with it. So Laban. So know that God has seen my hardships and the toil of my hands, and last night he rebuked you. So God has been protecting Jacob here. So 43, Laban answered Jacob, the women are my daughters, the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet what can I do today about these daughters of mine, or about the children they have borne? Come, now let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. He said to his relatives, gather some stones. So they took stones and piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jegar Sahadutha, and Jacob called it Galeed. Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. That is why it was called Galeed. It was also called Mizpah, because he said, may the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take any wives besides my daughters, even though no one is with us, remember that God is a witness between you and me. So they're making this deal between them. Like, they're going to separate. They can't look over each other's backs 24/7. But so they put it in that, hey, God is listening to this deal. He will be looking over, and he's going to be a witness to it. So 51, Laban also said to Jacob, here is this heap, and here is this pillar I have set up between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness, that I will not go past this heap to your side to harm you, and that you will not go past this heap and pillar to my side to harm me. Okay, so we got that. Nobody's can cross this pillar. And then 53, may the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, which is Terah, okay, judge between us. So that's Laban right there talking. This is the last thing kind of I had to point out. So 53, since Laban's been worshiping these gods of his house, okay, like he's definitely not a follower of God. He's just starting to make up God names here, because it says, may the God of Abraham, okay, so God, and then the God of Nahor and the God of their father judge between us. So Terah, we don't even really know much about Terah, okay, which is the father of Abraham and Nahor. And if Laban is worshiping these household gods, I bet he learned that from his dad, Nahor. So he's just throwing out all kinds of things here. He's just covering his bases like, hey, whatever God's up there, you're judging this. So the second part of 23. So Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. So there's the real God. Jacob is saying. He offered a sacrifice there in the hill country and invited his relatives to a meal. After they had eaten, they spent the night there. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then he left and returned home. All right, got all that out of the way. Laban caught up to him. They made a deal. God said you can't harm him, so they made a covenant right here. Very good evidence that Laban was not a spiritual man, towards God, but obviously of something from that divination with the cult stuff or whatever he was doing to them idols that was found in his house that Rachel stole. All right, any questions, comments, concerns, complaints?
Well, I don't understand.